Hey, hey, what is going on, crowdfunding fans? It is Nile the Brain of the Mainframe with Mr. Billy Tucci.
I like it now. You're starting to sound more like a radio DJ every single day. I can dig
Hey,
it.
everyone, welcome to we're going to be doing some tunes tonight with Billy Tucci.
Yeah, and it's great to be here. Nile, Scala, how are you?
It's going to be wild, Billy. It's going to be wild.
It's going to be wild. Hello, everybody out there. Crowdfunding centurions and crusaders all across the world in the fruited plain. We are upward and onward to our 28th episode. How friggin' fantastic is that?
We're on our way to the Dirty 30.
Oh man, the Dirty 30. That's going to be naughty, if I may. Anyway, tonight's guest is someone who we're both huge fans of. Mm-hmm. We pursued him like hunters pursuing a wounded llama in the deserts of Mars, and he graciously, I guess we beat him down enough that he said, okay, why not? But our guest tonight is a true creator. And building characters and working on this particular character for over 30 years. For anybody that's a fan of sci-fi, put your blaster in its holster, strap into your rocket ship, and get ready for another phenomenal interview. Tonight's guest is the one, the only, Mr. Ron Randall. Hello, Ron.
How we doing, Ron?
I'm doing great. It's worth being on the show just to be referred to as a wounded llama. That's a first.
I don't know. I was trying to think of some giant. The whole sci-fi thing. I was trying. A wounded llama with laser beams coming out of its head. But it's so good to see you, Ron. Am I yelling?
No, you're good, man. You're good.
Okay, but Ron, you were in the final hours, and forgive us for this being so late, but better late than never. You're in the final hours of Trekker Battlefields, and you have close to $30,000 with over 500 backers. I think you're like $20 away because I just checked it. I think you were
70.
No, I think he was third. Let me see. Hang on.
Oh, now you got me out of the edge of my seat.
Yeah, let me see. I thought you were closer than that. I thought I just checked it. Here we go. 29,980.
Oh, we've got another one? Hang on. Let's do a live refresh of this. 29,980. Yep, $20 away from 30K.
Yeah, and we were at 20. You were so hopefully one of our viewers saw it and like, oh my gosh, I have to get onto that.
Get on it right away.
But this is a really interesting time because and we need you to do this because we do have some friendly competition between you and tomorrow's guest.
Yes.
And, but it's a friendly competition. It's going on right now. But of course we have you're going up against your pal Carl Kessel and Dave Hahn with their Kickstarter project Impossible Jones. So Nile Scala is telling it that the first person to $1,000 more above and beyond, he's going to buy them a free beer.
Yes.
So if you can get over that $30,000 mark, Nile and I will buy this particular person when we see them beers all night.
Yes. They'll have free access to our Scotch Con.
Yes, Scotch Con, which is something which
Scotch Con. Where do you hold that one at?
Well, I think the first Scotch Con is going to be at the Terrific Con.
Yep. At Mohegan Sun Casino in Uncasville, Connecticut.
Yes. And, we're going to have a mini one at San Diego this year, but the big one is at the Baltimore Comic Con.
Yes.
And it's held outside the host hotel. Details will be forthcoming. I don't know, Mr. Randall, if you're planning to attend either of those shows. But please, we'd love to have you. Are you going to Baltimore?
I am, yep.
Oh, fantastic.
Well, by George, it's going to be Saturday evening after the Ringo Awards. We'll be outside the hotel out on the deck. It started a few years back. Some of the early luminaries were Jimmy Palmiotti, Darwin Cook, a couple of other creators. Ethan Van Sciver was there. Him and I would say that him and someone else did some naughty things, but it's since grown to an evening which is primarily and nothing misogynistic, but maybe I guess no women want to hang out with us, but it seems like a big manly festival of scotch and cigars, and a lot of us have started smoking pipes actually.
Oh my goodness.
Oh, nice.
You're into any of that, or you bring your own, and it's a lot of fun. And we sit outside, we play music, and it's a great time. I think Joe Sinnott joined us one time.
Wow.
It's a fun thing. It's kind of a way to decompress. We all hang out, and then the police come and chase us out. Because
Sounds great.
Anyway, Ron, if you can, we could talk about you. You're a graduate of the Kubert School. I'd love to hear that. Can you give us a little background on you growing up until your first public comic book story, but not to that?
Okay. Well, I was born and raised in Portland, Oregon. So, and when I was a kid, it was before there was a Federal Express, and it was before there was an internet and all that stuff. So I was 3,000 miles away from Midtown Manhattan, which is where the comic book industry was.
Yeah.
So when I was a little kid and I fell in love with comic books, and I had a buddy who had a bunch of comics, and he was the first. I mean, when I was a kid, everybody read comic books. They were just ubiquitous. They were like candy bars and stuff. You know, it was just something kids had, was that stuff. But I had one buddy in grade school who his dad actually was into comic books and had like a bunch of the Carl Barks Uncle Scrooge comic books. And so my friend was also had sorted his comic books by different creators. So I was over at his house one time, and there was a stack of Fantastic Four comics. Oh, these are all drawn by this guy, Jack Kirby. And for some reason, it was the first time that it occurred to me, again, I was pretty young, that people actually made comic books for their living. And I just thought, whoa, that sounds pretty fun.
Yeah.
And that for whatever reason, that sort of got lodged in my brain. And I thought that would be an awesome thing to do. And but again, I was 3,000 miles away from Midtown Manhattan. That was like saying I was on the other side of the world, you know, to me. And so the thought about being a professional comic book artist was like saying you wanted to be, you know, the president or an astronaut or something like that. But the bug never left me. As a kid, I was creating my own characters and drawing my own stories and sharing them with, you know, a few school buddies who were doing some drawing of their own. But one by one, they sort of drifted off and wound up doing other things. And for whatever reason, I never stopped doing the drawing. And so that stayed with me even as I went into high school and then into college. And then I heard about the Joe Kubert School. I was going to a liberal arts college here in Portland, double majoring in art and English. And I thought, I love this collegiate life. I love, you know, reading poems and writing short stories and painting still lifes. And I'm going to graduate in 2 years, and I'll starve to death because I have no employable skills.
Right.
But it was at that point, I was sort of like, I was a couple of years away from graduation, but I was sort of facing the abyss. I'm going to be entering the real world here. What am I going to do? And I saw an ad for the newly created Joe Kubert School of Cartoon and Graphic Arts in Dover, New Jersey. And I thought maybe that's my way out.
Yeah.
So I just, took a flyer, so to speak. I just put together a portfolio of some of the comic books that I've been drawing just for my own amusement, pretty much. And some other art stuff I'd done in my college classes. Sent it off to the school. Wound up having a phone interview with Joe Kubert himself, who was, like a personal hero of mine. Mm-hmm. And already a comic book legend by that time, of course. Kubert on the phone. I was like, wow, how good does it get, right? Oh, yeah. And the next thing I know, I'm standing in the middle of New Jersey saying, I guess I'm serious about this because here I am in the middle of New Jersey. So I went to Joe's school for a couple of years, and that leads into the part you don't want me to get into, which is my professional work.
Yeah. So just real quick, what was the Kubert School like? What year did you go to school? What year were you there?
I was there in, let me see, it was like 78, 79, I think.
Okay.
So I was in the second graduating class.
Oh, cool.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. When I was there.
In the mansion?
It was in the mansion. It was a 2-year program, mm-hmm. And there was this big old mansion, and then next to it was the carriage house, which, back in the day, that's where they housed the carriages. Mm-hmm. And the carriage house was like some dorm rooms, and then the mansion was the school. And a lot of students like myself didn't get into I just didn't get in time to get into the carriage house. So we were found other housing around Dover and some of the little towns nearby. So I wound up staying in a house with about 5 or 6 other cartoonists. You asked what was it like? The best way I can describe the Kubert School when I went there, it was like Animal House but full of cartoonists.
That's what I was picturing when you were describing that. Animal House
That's
popped
exactly
right into my
right.
head.
This old mansion, and there was a bunch of knuckleheads who wanted to be comic book artists. And I'll tell you this: little kid, Portland, Oregon. I didn't know there was anybody else, within 1,000 miles of me that was interested in pursuing being a professional comic book artist. And all of a sudden, I'm in a school that's wall to wall kids that are just have the same aspiration that I do. So it was really like finding my tribe in a way. So it was a pretty heady experience. It was just great. I learned a lot from the instructors, because all the instructors none of them were really experienced as like teachers and were experienced at like making formal lesson plans and delivering lectures and stuff. They all did their best at it, but these were people, mostly men, a couple of women teachers, but they'd had like 20, 30, 40 years of professional experience working in newspaper strips, graphic arts in one way or another, or specifically in comic books. So they were just like these endless fountains of knowledge. And they weren't always able to effectively get it out of their head through their mouths to describe what they wanted done. But they would give you an assignment and you'd be there at your desk working at it. And someone like Tex Blaisdell, who'd been, inking comic books since before I was born, I'm sure, was just, walking around at the different drawing boards. And I'd say, Tex, I'm having trouble trying to figure out how to simply ink a bunch of trees in the background so that they look like they've got leaves and it doesn't look like stiff and artificial. And he said, oh, let me show you. And he just took the brush, out of my hand and went bloop, 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 bloop. And there were trees. So just, seeing it done before my eyes like that was worth, a picture's worth 1,000 words sort of thing.
Yeah.
So I learned a lot from the instructors, but I learned just as much from a lot of my classmates. I was in school with Steve Bissett and Rick Veitch and Tom Yates and John Tollivan, Jan Dursma,
Wow.
Tom Mandrake.
Oh, wow.
The class, when I was a second year student, the freshman class included people like Tim Truman. So there was several of us that did go on to have careers in comics, and we're all just passionate about it, following our own nose to our own style and look, but also, greatly influenced by a master storyteller like Joe Kubert, who had just so much passion for storytelling, and he just, infused that into all of us.
Wow, what an experience, huh? I mean, I'm surprised no one's written a book yet about it.
I know.
Just think about that. And what's
it's because we're all too busy trying to make the living drawing
The
comic
Kubert
books.
Chronicles.
Yeah, that's true. But, the one thing that I found is almost everyone we've interviewed got into this, and I'd say 95% of the people I've met that got into comics, we were all comic book fans growing up. Like, we had this passion for it. Like, I want to do this. I want to do this. And it's kind of cool, that we had this little, like I said, this little community. And now, of course, it's everywhere. Everyone has a Deadpool shirt or a Captain America shirt. And,
Oh, yeah.
and I love it. Like,
It's the cool thing to do now.
Yeah, exactly.
You're not cool if you don't like comics and Star Wars and all that stuff now. Now you have to.
Yeah, and then it's funny because, like, my sons, that they've grown up in this and they're kind of tired of it already. They've grown up, they've known, they met Stan Lee so many times, had breakfast with him, things like that. And their friends are like, yeah, you're not going to Comic-Con. How are you going to go to Comic-Con? Because, this is their thing now. It's almost like when a band that you love, like really breaks out and a part of you like, oh, okay. And then the other part's like, damn, that was my band.
Yeah.
That was a little secret. Like, U2 before the Joshua Tree, blew up.
Yeah.
Like the Unforgettable Fire. There was still that little tight group, that little cool thing that we had, and now it's everywhere. And now, it's like, and it's, I find that at the New York Comic Con last year, Ron, I was sitting there at my booth, and some School of Visual Arts student came up, and he had to be 19 years old or something, and real this cockiness about him and stuff, and which, I don't know if I had, who knows, probably. And he's flipping through my portfolio and looking at the books on my table and some prints. And he's like, wow, who drew this? Who did this? And it's a game right there, Billy Tucci, I got a 10-foot booth. I'm like, well, me. He goes, oh, you did all this? I'm like, yeah. And he goes, it's pretty good. So I'm like, oh, thank you for validating 25 years of my life. So you make comics? Yeah, I kind of do. So
it's kind of a hobby, right?
yeah. It's
in your spare time.
Yeah. And but it's okay. So this leads now to Killers Above and Killers Below. Can you tell us about that and how that happened?
Oh, so Billy is describing. I'm not sure it was my absolute first, but it was one of my very first professional jobs in comics.
Okay.
So what happened? It might have been the very first one. It's a long time ago now, Billy. So, but the way this came about was when I was as the second year of my time at the Cuban School was coming to an end. We were getting near to graduation. Joe sort of picked some of us of our graduating class, which wasn't huge. It was a pretty small group of people, but there were a handful of us who clearly we were earmarked for. We wanted to get into comic books, and like you were saying, Billy had lived and breathed them since we were kids. So we had, I guess, in his eyes, the most potential to possibly make it. So he was the editor of the Sergeant Rock book at DC at the same time as he was running his own school. Don't know when the dude slept, but so he had these little, and comics back then, a lot of them anyway, had a main feature that'd be maybe 18 pages long, or maybe 20, and then there'd be some very short backup stories. And in the Sergeant Rock book, sometimes these backup stories would be 2 pages long or 3 or 4 pages long. Usually written by Robert Kanigher, who had been a seasoned comic book writer since, I don't know, the 50s. And Joe would give some of these very short stories to some of us, students as we were just graduating, to give us a little bit of professional experience and let us see what our work looked like printed in an actual comic book. And let me tell you, the first time you see that, it's a revelation. But anyway, so that's how it came about. This is a script. I think it was a Kanigher script that Joe gave me to work on. And I always say to people that the 2 formal years that I had at the Cuban School gave me a lot of material to work with, a lot of tools that I was starting to experiment with and exercise. But my third year, my finishing year, was that first year out of the Cuban School when I was doing several of these backup stories, working one-on-one directly with Joe Kubert, because he would hand me the script. I'd go to my apartment and I'd work on my thumbnails. When I had them done, I'd call up Joe Kubert. I called up Joe Kubert on the telephone. I can't even hardly believe I'm saying this now. Yeah. And say, hey, Joe, I got the thumbnails ready. And he'd say, oh, sure, come over to the house. We're having dinner now. Come by in a half an hour or something. So I drive over to Joe's house, walk up the stairs, the outside stairs to his studio, which is above the garage in this huge, gorgeous house they had. And I'd sit down next to Joe Kubert at his drawing board. The back of my neck is tingling even as I say it. And I would show him, these little breakdowns, these thumbnails that I had drawn for the pages. And Joe would look them over, and he would just take out another piece of paper and say, I see what you're going for in that shot. That's not too bad, but have you thought about this? And he would do like 2 or 3 just different compositions or panel breakdowns. And each of them were just a million times better than my solution. And he wasn't doing it to show off. He wasn't doing it to beat me up. He was just saying, there's a lot of ways to skin this cat. There's a lot of ways to tell a good, vital, story with clarity and make it really compelling and bring it alive to the reader and draw them into the story, because that was what Joe was all about. And he was just sharing with me some of his stuff. It was like he unscrewed his head and let me climb in to see how his thinking worked. It was that intense of an experience. So then I'd go back home, stinging a little bit. But it wasn't, he did it in such a way that it was more like, yeah, I see those possibilities you were excited by, you were inspired. And then I'd work up the pencils and come back and do the same thing. And then I'd do the lettering. And then I'd go back and do the inking. So it's every step in the process. Joe was like, taking me through the process of how to make a competent, reasonably professional, beginner's professional comic book story. So Killers Above, Killers Below. Plus, I was a sucker for World War I. When I was a kid, I fell in love with, all those, I read books about the World War I flying aces and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So, anyway, and the story had a little bit of that in it too. But that's how that came about. And that was really my like I said, my finishing, it was like that master apprentice sort of relationship you hear about, where one hapless slub is able to work with a genius, and that genius does the best they can to give the person a little bit of a chance. So that's what I got out of that.
Oh, very cool. Now, do you have any pieces from Joe that you've hung on to that maybe you were working with him with?
Yes, I do. On those short backup stories, Joe was a very hands-on editor. I would get scripts, even scripts from someone like Bob Kanigher, who had been, probably writing comics as long as Joe had been drawing them or close. But Joe was the editor, and Joe would take a black marker and a red marker, and he would, wipe out panel descriptions or lines of dialogue and scribble in other ones. And he would do the same with art, over me, over Russ Heath, over anybody. If Joe felt that this wasn't telling the Sergeant Rock story just right, boom, 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 he would roll up his sleeves and get right in there. He didn't do that on these other backup stories very much. A little bit now and then if I'd really screwed the pooch badly. But at the same time, I did get, and I don't even remember the circumstances. I don't know why in the world this is allowed to happen, but I was allowed to work on one or two of the main Sergeant Rock stories with Joe. But when you look at the pages that I quote unquote worked on, it's like 99% Joe Kubert there, because Sergeant Rock was his baby. Nothing was going to go into that book that Joe wasn't 100% ready to sign off on. And I couldn't do that good of work back then, so Joe really worked that stuff through. So, and as I got several pages from the story back. So I've got like what are 95% Joe Kubert originals. I got a handful of those, and I will not part with those. Yeah.
Very cool. I just want to interject with one thing. And if I get his last name wrong, I apologize. But Aaron Levere, Ron sounds like a cool guy. Glad I could help you reach the 30K. You have now broken over 30,000. You're at $30,070.
Oh, was it Aaron? Did you say his name?
His name is Aaron. Yep.
Thank you very much, Aaron. Glad to have you on board.
Thank you, Aaron. Thank you so much. It's and trust me, you won't be disappointed. So, fantastic. So how about this? I mean, right now, so Ron is this young lark. He's a babe out of the woods and
a gazelle running through the forest.
Right, doesn't sleep for 2 years working on as we do. Right, when you're working on deadlines, because that's how
as we do.
And then you come out and your first gig is written by Bob Kanigher, and you work with Joe Kubert and given to you by Joe Kubert. That's pretty great.
That's just man. That just gives you goosebumps right there. That's incredible. And then I have to ask, and then you also
Mark Twain who had the phrase. Oh, go ahead.
Nope, go ahead. I'm gonna get into another question. So, and then you also got into Dungeons and Dragons. You were illustrating for Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah, that was a few years down the road. I'd had some years working on a few different titles for Dark Horse. I mean, for DC. But then after a while, I did wind up when DC got the rights to produce some of the TSR properties. They did a book called Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, and I did one called Dragonlance, which was another TSR property that was a role playing game. And I got the chance to draw that too. Yeah, got to work with Dan Mishkin, who's a wonderful guy and a great writer. And that book, some of these licensed property books, because that's what this was. Those can be really challenging to work on. In the case of Dragonlance, not only was it a role-playing game, but there were a series of paperback novels about the main characters in this world. So we were going to do a comic book called Dragonlance, but the stories of all of the main characters in that world that had already existed anyway were pretty well told in those paperbacks. So Dan especially was faced with this task of, how do I make this world interesting and tell stories that people haven't already read in paperbacks? So the solution was we came up with a character of our own and put her as the central character in these stories, and she would encounter these other the established existing characters from time to time. And so I just thought Dan did a masterful job of making it feel like we were working in that world, with all the trappings of, there were red dragons and green dragons and black dragons, and they had all their, these rules that they all played by. So all that stuff was there and very consistent, but we were telling sort of, fresh new stories, getting to explore some new terrain with it. So it was a lot of fun. And as the artist, it was a chance for me to express my love for some of my, some of my favorite artists. Besides Joe, there were people like Hal Foster and Alex Raymond and Al Williamson, people who cut their teeth and made their mark by drawing, high adventure and science fiction and fantasy books more than, superheroes. So anytime I get a chance to work on a title like Dragonlance, I would just pull out my Wally Wood and my Hal Foster.
Yeah. Do you remember the first superhero you started drawing when you were growing up?
When I was a little kid, it was Superman. Yeah.
Superman. And I have another question. Do you ever still draw any of the characters you created as a child? Like, have you ever reimagined them?
Yeah, it's a good question, but no, I don't. The ones when I was a child, what I was creating were, pale imitations of the DC and Marvel superhero books that I read at the time. And they're exactly where they belong, which is like in a cardboard box in my attic.
Drying out to be kindling? No.
Yeah, exactly.
You could start a whole company, with those characters and make millions of dollars.
Or lose millions of dollars. It could go either way.
There you go. So could you tell us what your experience with working with Periscope Studio?
Yeah, we've changed our name now. It's Helioscope Studio.
Yeah.
But Helioscope it's I was going to say about the Qubit School. There's a Mark Twain quote. I think it's Mark Twain who said, "Youth is wasted on the young." Somebody said that. Yeah. Because when I was at the Qubit School, I think we all knew it was a pretty great opportunity and experience, but there's no way that we could really appreciate it for exactly how rich it was and how lucky we were all to be there. Now I am old enough to understand how lucky I am to be a part of an organization like Helioscope. It's a great, we call it an artist co-op because that's how, everybody is their own, self-employed person running their own business. We have this shared workspace where everybody, kind of like at the Qubit School, everybody's got their workstation. And we can go, it's a large open office space. But it looks like a bunch of comic book artists live there, I'll tell you, or at least work there. So the dynamic is that you go in there and you're doing your own work and sort of minding your own business. And sometimes it's dead silent for hours at a time because everybody's just doing their job. They get their headphones on and whatever as they're working. But then a couple of people have a conversation. They'll talk about some movie they've seen or a TV show, or they'll say, "Hey, I just found out something about working in Photoshop. Did you know you can do this?" Or, "I'm just trying out these new markers, and I think they work pretty well." Shop talk will just sort of spontaneously erupt. And sometimes 2 or 3 people will have a little quiet conversation about it. And sometimes it turns in like this sort of a more of a group discussion. So it's very fertile soil for creative ideas, for just improving work techniques and all kinds of stuff. And also they just happen to be really fun, creative, imaginative people to hang around with. So just like at the Qubit School, I'm super lucky to be a part of something like that.
Yeah, what a fun, positive environment it sounds like.
Yeah.
Yeah,
that's exactly right. Everybody there has really bought into the idea about the rising tide, raises all ships. When anybody at that studio discovers something new or gets a lead about something, we share all that stuff. We're all pretty well invested in everybody else's success in their careers. Now, and everybody's got their own path that they're on. So, so you're running your own show, but you sort of feel something of to an extent, a support network behind it. And that's a lot of freelancers don't have anything like that.
That's true. Yeah.
Now, is everybody wanting to do a crowdfunded comic now?
No, right? Well, they do have support now. They have crowdfunding comics on YouTube. We're here. So we've just broken into our first half hour of the show. So if you guys don't mind, I really would love to get into Trekker. And I would like to play your Kickstarter video as an introduction to the campaign. And then let's come back to our guest screen here and let's talk how Trekker even came to be.
Sounds great.
Hi, I'm Ron Randall, and I'm thrilled to welcome you to this campaign to fund a brand new science fiction graphic novel about the 23rd century bounty hunter Mercy St. Clair, Trekker Battlefields. This is my third Trekker Kickstarter. If you're already familiar with Trekker, you know that every Trekker book works as a great introduction to the characters and the world, and that each book tells a complete, standalone, high-voltage adventure, beginning, middle, and end. Battlefields is a perfectly explosive example of all of that. In Battlefields, Mercy journeys into the heart of the most remote and dangerous quadrant of the galaxy. There, she crosses paths with the powerful forces that are contesting to shape her world. On the battlefields, the stakes and the body count rise higher than ever. Battlefields introduces new characters, new worlds, new revelations, and new dangers for us all to experience right alongside Mercy. I can't wait to get the story into your hands. So I built a campaign with as many awesome rewards and stretch goals as possible to make sure that our task of bringing this book to print is not only successful, but fun too, and that it results in the best and coolest Trekker book yet. You can see the rewards all listed in the project information below. Thanks for watching. Thank you for any level of support you give, and thank you for sharing word about this campaign. I love bringing these adventures to you, and that can only keep happening with your help. Now it's time to armor up. I'll see you on the battlefields.
All right, there you guys have it. An introduction to Trekker Battlefields. So, Ron, please
Great
give
video.
us the origin of Trekker.
The origin of Trekker. Well, it's funny, when you were asking me a little bit ago about if I ever sort of dredged up some of my old childhood characters and try to bring up to date, and I haven't, and it's largely because I'm doing something better than that right now.
Yeah.
I'm taking a character that I created as a more mature creator, a property I think has a certain richness and something that is uniquely its own, and I'm getting to do that, and I've been doing that for quite a while now. So, and that's Trekker. So, Trekker began when I had so I got out of the Cuba school. Spent a few years in New Jersey getting my career, getting my legs underneath me in my career there, working at largely DC and Summit Marvel. Then I moved back here to Portland, Oregon, again, 3,000 miles away from what was still the center of the comics industry. But it was the summer of 1985 that I moved back. And that was right around the time that the way comic books were being distributed was changing. I don't want to make this a big, long history lesson, but because of
please
the way...
do. People love that. Everyone knows that.
Well, so originally, I mean, comic books were available on newsstands, and Marvel and DC, the way I've always heard the story, largely controlled that market. So if you were another comic book company like Tower Comics, the Thunder Agents and stuff, that had a line of comic books, and you wanted to get them out there on the stores too, it was very difficult to do that. The two big fish were kind of protecting their pond. Yeah. But with the advent of the direct sales market, all the comic book shops that are around the country now, new comic book companies could start up on a pretty small scale operation, but still get their books distributed throughout the country. So it was a game changer. So you had little comic book companies, largely small black and white companies, cropping up all over the country. The industry was no longer just centered in Manhattan. There was First Comics in Chicago and Comico in, I think, Connecticut. Could be wrong on that one. Eclipse Comics down in California. And in my backyard in Portland, Oregon, a little company called Dark Horse Comics. And so my first summer back here in Portland, I was a guest at a local comic book convention. I'd happened to be went to a comic book shop, saw a flyer, got a hold of the guy, got invited to have a table at the show. I emphasize that just happened because this is an example of right place, right time. I was there, And these two tall guys were coming by. I was, setting up at my table with some of my original art from, I think I was drawing the Warlord book at DC at the time. And these two tall guys came walking by, and they introduced themselves as Mike Richardson and Randy Stradley. And they said they were starting up a comic book company, and they were looking to have some guys who were established professionals to come and work for them, which is a candy business move. I'm not sure that was their motivation, but it was because, a lot of these companies are starting up were, kind of like, sort of amateur shows, not the ones that I named before, but some of the other ones. And Mike wanted to get some people who were established pros to help, make his company take a good, strong first step into the market. Anyway, I was working on a regular book for DC Comics at the time. I was on a monthly comic book. Mm-hmm. And back then, that was kind of like the definition of you're there, and why would I leave that to go work for these two very, very pleasant, tall men? I didn't know them. Their company could have been belly up in 6 months. I didn't know. But one of them, and I can't remember which one it was, uttered this fatal phrase. They said to me, if you come and work for us, we will pay you your rate and you can do whatever you want. And I said to myself, I'll never hear that sentence again in my life. Yeah. And I was right. I was right about that. So even though, again, I had a steady, regular gig at DC and I was skeptical, or at least, trepidatious, I just couldn't get that thought out of my head. Not, gee, I wonder if I could create a series that might be commercial and marketable enough that I could persuade some publisher to publish it. That wasn't the offer. That wasn't what they were saying. They were saying, basically, the way I heard what they said was, Ron, what's your dream project? Come and do it for us. That's what I heard them say. So I just said, what would be my top thing to draw if I could do it? And it was I wanted to do, like I said before, I love science fiction. I wanted to do a science fiction comic, and there weren't many opportunities to do that in comics in the landscape of the day. And I wanted to have the lead character be a woman. I knew I wanted the series to explore some things about violence and some of the dark and gritty comic stuff that was coming in comics at the time, which I found compelling, but also kind of unsettling.
Yeah.
And I just thought it would be there would be a great tension between having, especially back then, if you had a pretty woman in a comic, she was expected to fill a certain role.
Yeah.
And I thought putting her in a different role, where the story is about her, that just felt really compelling to me. I thought this is a comic book I would like to create, and it's a comic book I'd like to read. So that's how I came up with the idea for Trekker. I thought if I have a character and I make her a bounty hunter, that's a pretty loose-limbed, freewheeling sort of basic premise. So those stories can go just about anywhere. I also knew I wanted the series to take her from where she begins and take her over the course of the series on this long journey of personal discovery, where she finds out things about herself and finds out things about the world, and I want all the readers to see all this stuff coming along before she does, and that she eventually has a larger role to play in things. Anyway, so it was a big, ambitious series, and I pitched it to Dark Horse, and instead of them saying, which would have been the prudent thing to say, Ron, that's a very nice idea, but we don't know how to sell a comic like that. Or we're not sure there's a market for a comic. They just, maybe because they were kind of young and maybe almost as naive as I was, but they just said, that sounds cool, do it. So then I had to figure out, how to do it. I knew I didn't have the writing chops to tell this sprawling sort of Dune sort of scale, science fiction epic thing that I had in mind. I wanted to get there. So I started off with sort of more modest in scale, strong action adventure stories, because I thought I could land that ship. I thought I could tell that kind of a story well enough to satisfy a reader. And I would pepper through those earlier stories little hints and characters and elements that then I would develop and bring together when I was a more accomplished writer. Mm-hmm. And so that's where we're at in the series now. It was my passion when I created it. I'm even more excited and happy to be working on it now, because man, I am a lot better at my craft than I was 30 years ago. Yeah. I know what I'm doing a lot better now. So I feel like I can really, have these stories each building on each other and expanding the scale of things and raising the stakes and all the stuff that you want to see in a cool science fiction series that goes on for a while. You want the payoffs to get bigger, right? So that's where we're at.
And what year was that, Ron? that Randy and Mike walked up to you?
That would have been like 85, 86.
Wow.
Oh, wow.
That's incredible.
And a little side note about the name Trekker, because some people will say, "Is that a Star Trek thing?" And in my own defense, what I have to say is when I was thinking of the series, like I said, I wanted somebody who's a bounty hunter. She's on the journey to track down the bad guys, but she's also on this longer, more of an internal journey or whatever. And I was trying to think of a good title for the series, and when I thought, well, I thought the word Trek was a cool word. It implies, a journey, and there's a certain sense of adventure to it, and also dramatic, hard K's and R sounds in it. And Trekker sounded pretty cool, and I thought, well, there is Star Trek, but at the time, Star Trek was pretty much a dormant property. Yeah. The original series had been off the air for 20 years.
Yeah,
there'd been a movie or two, but but those movies, but back then movies and comics weren't as closely tied as they were now. And I thought, well, it's a good word, and I just sort of got married to it, and so I pitched that to Dark Horse. And right after we got the ball rolling on Trekker was when Paramount, I think it was Paramount, announced, oh, they're going to do Star Trek: The Next Generation. Yeah. And I thought, well, I'm screwed, but it was too late. I'd already sort of, already sort of made the commitment to that title, and I still like it. So, and it's worked out okay, I guess.
I heard an interesting story that there was someone who worked there, who actually pitched you to call it Shrekker. Could that be true?
Boy, I have no memory of that. So,
as in Bob Shrekker? No, I'm kidding. There are people that know. I'm sorry.
Don't get me in trouble with Bob. Don't get me in trouble. He lives in town here. He'll come over here and beat me up.
So okay, now, so then you loaded on Trekker.com. Is it all the previous published work? It's available.
Yeah, that was a key. That was a
Trekker
key
Comic.
Step. Yeah, TrekkerComic.com.
Right.
That was a key step for me making the website, because Trekker had her own series for a while, but as previously discussed, I had not built a series that I was trying to make particularly, commercial or marketable. In my naivety, I thought, well, that's the publisher's job to sell the comic books. I just make what I want to make, right? So it was kind of a hard sell. It didn't find a really massive audience. So after a while, I was reduced to just being able to do a little story here, a little story there, and that was a very frustrating way to try to tell an ongoing series. So ultimately, I just put the whole thing on hiatus until I could find a way to get back to telling the story in a sustained, ongoing way, which is, I think, what serves the series and the readers the best. So when I realized I could make it into a webcomic, I'm a slow learner, but I got there eventually. I did that. I started posting all the original stories on a regular basis, and the key was I made the public declaration. I said, by the time I finished publishing all the original stories, I'll have the next story ready to go. So I sort of put myself in the hot seat there, but it worked out. So that's how I first returned to doing Trekker after a long hiatus. For about 12 years, I didn't draw any Trekker. I'd go to a convention and people would say, "Hey, Ron, when's the next Trekker story coming out?" Yeah. And I said, and I would answer them truthfully. I said, "The script is done. It was handwritten and it was in a drawer right by my drawing board." Yeah. And I said, as soon as I can find a way where I don't have to just do a story and then it disappears, and then a couple years later maybe another story comes out and disappears and nobody finds it, that was just too frustrating, So when I got the website up to get the ball rolling that way, that's how I was able to get back to doing Trekker.
Well, it's a fantastic website, and I mean, your art is just phenomenal. It really. I mean, and how much fun is it to create this whole world? I know you're a big, with Alex Raymond and stuff like that, and you love like the sci-fi stuff, and I mean, again, I got into She. I'm into Japanese history. That's how I got into She, and it's really cool, isn't it, to do these and to create these worlds and things like that, and it just seems like the book just looks like a lot of fun. It always, every page looks like a lot of fun. It's always moving and stuff, and well done, my friend. Well done. I mean, you can tell.
Thanks very much. I mean, I do want it to be fun. I want, like I said, Trekker was my one shot to have it all. I want to have a comic book that had, like as I say to people, the 12-year-old in me loves explosions and spaceships crash landing on swamp planets. Yeah. And swashbuckling action adventure and spotted lizards and all that stuff. Yeah. and then the grown up the grown up whatever creator storyteller, the grown up storyteller in me needs a story that has some meat to it and some characters that feel real and believable, that you can invest in, that you want to go on journeys with. Those are the stories that I love reading, and so Trekker, to me, it's sometimes I describe it as it's a long form character study disguised as a series of action adventure comics, because I want it to be fun. I want it to be lively and bouncy and all that good stuff. And I also want it to have that other resonance of, here's a character inhabiting a world that I care about, and I want to read the next story. I want to see what happens. I want to see what happens to Mercy St. Clair next time. And oh boy, she's really making some dumb decisions here. I hope it isn't going to get her killed. You know, all that sort of stuff. It means the world to me when a new reader finds the series and buys into it and signs on for the long run. That's what I want. I'm not trying to create something that's flashy, eye candy, or it's the event of the month. I just loved what Hal Foster did with Prince Valiant. When he created Prince Valiant, then he drew that for 30 years. Every Sunday in the Sunday paper, that was his career. And I know a lot of artists they'll do a mini series here, one shot there, a little run on this, a little run on that. But I love the world that I'm building with Trekker, and I love the community of readers that have found it and support it. And I just want to sustain this thing till we get to the end of Mercy's journey. That's my big goal.
I mean, it's fantastic. I mean, comics are supposed to be an escapism, and it is supposed to be entertainment. And you've created this epic, you know what I mean, for 30 plus years. That we're going on almost 35 years. Mm-hmm. And it's wonderful. And it's great that you have these fans, and they're like, when's the next Trekker coming out, and things like that. And I have a curious question. I see you have a tablet there. Do you draw on that, or are you all digital now, or do you do your roughs on that and then ink? Like, what's your work process like? Your storytelling process, your artistic process.
Yeah, well, it's evolved over time, and some of that's because you were mentioning Helioscope, and everybody at the studio uses all sorts of tools. Pencils on paper is used. People work exclusively on their tablets and pads now. I have my process has evolved, so it's mostly done on the computer now. I still like to do my thumbnails on a piece of paper with a pencil. I'll scribble out my thumbnails that way, and then I'll take a little marker and I will ink my thumbnails just so that I can make sure that I know what that scribble is when I come back and look at it tomorrow. Oh yeah, so it was a figure, wasn't it? Not a tree or something. So then I have my little thumbnails done, and then I usually scan those into the computer, load them up onto. I still use Manga Studio, which is now called something else, Paint Clip Art. I can never get the name of that right, but anyway, it's another drawing program like Photoshop, except more specifically for comic book artists, and it's a great program. Great tools that I've been able to fine tune to the point where it generates lines that feel sort of like pencil lines. And it generates ink lines that are sort of like the lines that I use on the tools I did Trekker with originally. So I was skeptical about going into the digital world until I could find ways to modify the tools so the finished look feels close enough to what I was doing, so that Trekker doesn't feel like a different story now than it did then, other than the gradual evolution that any artist has over the course of 30 years. Yeah. But yeah, I work a lot digitally now. It's so much easier to make corrections, for one thing. Basically the bottom line is it makes me more efficient. I think I can draw as well or better working digitally, and it's increased my productivity. And when you're working on something like when you're a self-publisher of a creative comic book and you're running Kickstarters and spending time on social media to do all the marketing, when you're wearing all those hats, you need to be as efficient and pragmatic as practical about every single thing that you do. Yeah. From drawing a page to building a Kickstarter. You do not have a lot of time to waste. I miss parts of working analog. I really do. There are still things that I could do with a brush that I haven't figured out how to replicate on a computer screen. But I just come to the conclusion that the net gains outweigh the things that I have to let go of. And I didn't use brushy techniques on Trekker anyway. I was always inking with markers from the beginning, so it was an easier transition to make that way.
Yeah, and like we were talking, you and I, is earlier, is, you know, when the marketing department's on, when you're on social media, you know, the art department's not working, you know.
Yeah.
And then when you're fulfilling it, you know, when the shipping department's on, the marketing department isn't really working, because it's, you know, it's a small boutique way of publishing, which I adore. I love this. That's why. And Nile and I had this conversation, 3 months ago when we started this or so. And we just talked about our love. I was getting into my first Kickstarter, and I was just so fascinated by it. And Nile too, he's a creator, and he's got his coming out next year. Like, well, you know, why don't we have a show? And let's, you know, I've so many friends that are in the industry, and let's share this, because there are people that charge $500 for a course in this. And that's why we thank you for sharing your time with us, with the people out there, because so many people do want to get into this and to create, you know, and they, you know, and we're really living our comic book dreams. It's almost like the American comic book dream. Yeah. You know, you can do what you want. Yeah. And again, thank you for your time doing this. And and
all the tools are there, man.
Yeah.
As we've said, I mean, everything is out there. It's just really, you know, it's not going to be handed to you, and you got to work really hard and dedication. I mean, it's self-discipline at its best. I mean, it really is. I mean, me and Billy were just talking the other day. We were just like, bro, I'm so exhausted. I mean, I'm freaking beat. He's like, you know, it's like, yeah, man, I'm beat. But you just keep moving on, man. Yeah. That's it.
Well, if you sometimes when I'm at a convention and I'm talking to people about, you know, I've done work for DC and whatever, and I've drawn, you know, Star Wars comics, and I've drawn Supergirl, and those are really fun jobs to do. I've also done Trekker, and one of those jobs is like babysitting somebody else's kid, and one of those jobs is like raising your own child. And you do insane things for your own child. You are ridiculous, you know, as a parent. And you don't give it a second thought, and you never ask yourself, is this worthwhile, or why am I doing this? Yeah. And that's the way I feel about, I've got to do another tweet, or I've got to do another Facebook post, or, you know, I've got to send another email to somebody about something that has to do with Trekker. And I never say, maybe I won't do that. That never occurs to me to not do it. It's something that's going to, you know, if it's something I think is going to help me do a better job of making my stories and getting them out to the readers, I just don't question it. I wouldn't. What I'm saying is, I wouldn't do this for anything else. I wouldn't do this kind of work for anything else. You know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And going back, I digress. Going back to the conversation you had about using the tablet, say, and you can't quite duplicate that particular line you like. One thing I've learned is, and I'm sure you've done this too. Have you ever agonized over a page or something you drew wrong, and it bothers you, like I said, a line weight or something like that, and no one else notices it?
All the time. That's, you know, the artist. That's one of the artist's dilemmas, isn't it? We are our own worst critics, and we will obsess over the little finger on that hand of that background character. Doesn't look like that. It would naturally lie that way. Yeah. No one's gonna notice that.
They don't.
And I always say this is a big part of. This is one of the things that separates the professionals from those who aren't professionals. You learn to pick your battles, and you learn that you've got to make some compromises, because the book has to get done. The book has to come out. I want every line I draw on Trekker to be the perfect line. And you know what? None of them are the perfect line. They're as good as I can afford to make it now. And I put everything I can in each one of those drawings. But the most important thing to me is to tell the story.
Yeah.
I'm not interested in doing a fun, showy drawing that will impress people with, oh, look at what a neat artist Ron is. I'm not interested in writing a line of dialogue where people say, that Ron is sure a clever dialogue writer. I want them to say, that was a damn fine story that I just read. If I get that, they're going to come back for another one of those. So there are I can look back at every single page I've drawn of anything, Trekker included, and just wince over the line, like you were saying, the line weights or the awkward poses of this thing or that thing. And hopefully I'm the only person that's going to notice at least the most of that stuff.
And it seems like that too. And you've really hit on something important that I feel that some people, or far too many people to do Kickstarters and Indiegogos and stuff like that fall into, is that you're working on your tablet. You got to get that book done. You want to get that book in the hands of your readers as fast as possible. And we all understand we're our own worst critics. We have a lot of work to do to put these things together. But again, Nile and I have talked to a lot of people have had experience that I've submitted to I pledged to a Kickstarter. I backed a Kickstarter 4 years ago. And I still haven't gotten the stuff or heard from the creator.
Yeah.
Oh,
everybody I know I've done several, sort of podcast interviews and just talked to a lot of people about Kickstarters from when I was first preparing to do my first one. And everybody's got that horror story to tell. Yeah. I backed a book 2 years ago, 3 years ago. I don't hear from the creator anymore. I had a couple of things going for me when I turned to Kickstarter. I had a couple of Trekker stories in my pocket. They were already done. The whole reason I turned to Kickstarter was I had these stories that were done, and I didn't have a vehicle to get them out on the timely, on the timely rate that I wanted them to come out at. Mm-hmm. So when I launched my first Kickstarter, that story was done, and I could say that to the backers. So I could say, if this Kickstarter is successful, it'll take me a little while to sort of, do the extra work I need to do for fulfillment and finish up some files and stuff. But this book is pretty much ready to go to the printer now. And that first campaign, the readers had the book in their hands like within, I think it was 4 months after the campaign ended. Same thing with the last campaign. And now for the new one, Trekker Battlefields, same is true. I've got the lead story is done. I had to work hard to get it done in time before I launched this time, but I really want to be able to say that, if it's at all possible, to have at least the vast majority of the book, meaning the main story and some of the other stuff, ready to go before I launch a Kickstarter. No, that's a luxury that not a lot of creators have, and I understand that. Yeah. But one of my fears about Kickstarter as a whole is exactly what that horror story that Billy told, because if that happens often enough, people are going to stop coming to Kickstarter. There's going to be too much skepticism. Well, I've backed Kickstarters before, whatever. But so what I'm invested in is, and what I'm pleading with anybody who's thinking about doing a Kickstarter, if you can have the as much of the work done before you launch as possible, that's great. But if you can't, be as realistic as you can about how long it's going to take you to get it done. Because as you guys probably know, when you're setting up your Kickstarter, one of the things that you have to do, you feel like, what's your target for your funding goal and when your campaign is going to run. But you also have to say, what is the date of expected delivery? When do you think your backers are going to get their product?
Yes.
Be super honest with yourself. Figure out how long you think it's really going to take to do the book. Research how much time it takes to turn things around with printing. Are you going to have your books printed domestically or overseas? It's a huge difference in time, depending on what you use. And then take that time estimate and double it. Yeah. And then maybe add half again. And that's when you tell people you're going to get your book out to them. Mm-hmm. Because if you welch on that deal, then you start to erode the credibility of this entire wonderful thing that we have going with Kickstarter. If and disasters happen. That's the other thing I say, and you guys probably don't always know this, that if you've run a successful Kickstarter and you're working on it and then something happens, death in the family, or tornado wipes out your house, or the printer goes out of business, or whatever it is, just be in touch with your backers. Like Billy, you said, you don't hear from that creator anymore. You send out those updates and be transparent. I was wrong. I thought it was going to take me X amount of months to draw the book, but it's slowed down. Here's some process. Here's some progress that I've made on it, and with this far along, and I think in 3 more months we'll be there, something like that. But just having that, having that dialogue will create trust and strengthen the relationship you have with your backers. They'll say, "Oh man, the poor guy, a tornado hit his house." They'll feel for you and they'll stick with you. If you disappear and don't say anything to them, they'll go away, and they'll go away from all of us.
Yeah.
And then so There, that's a little bit of a soapbox. Sorry about that.
No, that's
No, please.
nice. I mean, and now if I may, and then I'll shut up and let you start because I keep asking because I'm just I'm excited. What you're doing, you get your books out within 4 months of the campaign ending. That's just like Diamond Comics. That's just like with the comic shops, pretty much the same timeline because remember, you have to get your solicitations in early. You have to do your advertising. By the time it gets from Diamond, from the distributor to the comic shops, and they have another month to order. And then you have another 2 months by the time, another month by the time the numbers come in. And then you have to the end of that month, the following month. So you're really right in line of how the direct market works. And that's really impressive. I mean, 4 months. Wow.
Thanks. Well, I mean, probably it's a product of a few things. One is, like I said, I've had the advantage of having the books, the books been sort of front loaded before I launched the campaign. That helps. I've just been sort of conditioned by 30 some years of working in the business to get your books out when you say you're going to get your books out. And the campaigns have been supported enough that's made that possible up till now to do that. But what it takes is I need the campaigns to raise enough money, to pay me to write and draw the books as well as getting them printed. And that's something that's a case I can make if you want, is that when I set my funding goal for all of the 3 campaigns that I've done, I set it at a level that would let me, print the books and ship the books and cover the cost of the campaign, not paying myself one dime for writing the book and drawing the book.
Yeah.
And theoretically, this is my career. This isn't a very expensive hobby that I have.
Yep.
So the stretch goals that I have in my campaign, sometimes people put on stretch goals as fun ways to make some additional extras for the book and that stuff. And I do that, but part of that stretch goal money is to start putting a few dollars in my pocket to pay me for the months that it takes to write and draw the comic book.
Yeah.
I when I launched my first campaign, I didn't have the courage or the confidence to be able to ask for, $40,000, $45,000, $50,000. I probably wouldn't have made that. And it was really important to me. And it's still the primary thing is I want to get these stories out there.
Yeah.
But to be able to keep doing the campaigns at like once every 8 or 9 months and fulfill them within 4 months, I need this. I need the support. I got fantastic support for the first 2, almost 3 campaigns now. No complaints. But I need that to grow more for me to be able to be confident that I can sustain this rate and just make Trekker, pretty much my full-time gig. At this point, I'm still having to break up and do some other things. And sometimes those are fun jobs to do, but, I want to prioritize Trekker as much as possible. And it's the backing from the readers that makes that all happen.
Yeah. So, Ron, we got a question from Muttman. Is how often during creation of the book do you update your backers? So, throughout the crowdfunding campaign and after.
Boy, I don't have a set schedule. Once a week at a minimum. For the first couple of weeks, I try to. It's a really good question because you got to strike that balance. Right? I don't want to be flooding people's inboxes with another sort of trivial update. I try not to have that happen, but at least once a week, I want to let I send an update to the backers. For one thing, I'm encouraging them and urging them to help share word about the campaign. I'm a terrible marketer. I as I say to people, I did not get into comic books to sell comic books. I'm here to make the damn thing. So I'm on Twitter and Facebook as much as I can. I go to conventions and I love talking with fans and meeting them, but it's not a really efficient way to get the word out to a lot of people, having one-on-one conversations. So the more other people can help spread the word. So that's one of the primary things I try to have my updates be about is, here's a tweet. You can share this tweet. You spread the word. I ask for a lot of that kind of help. And so once a week, and then if sometimes 2 or 3 times. And as the campaign gets closer to the end, I'm finding that I'm doing my updates more frequently.
Yep.
Because I want to emphasize, there's so many aspects to a campaign, all the different reward levels, and sometimes you get add-ons and things like that, and you put all that into the body of your campaign. But a lot of times, that's a lot of information for somebody visiting the site to sort of take in at once. So sometimes you have to say something to somebody 2 or 3 or 4 different times in 2 or 3 or 4 different ways before they say, "Oh yeah, I could get another copy of the book," or something like that. So. So that's, I guess that a long answer. Maybe that helps you though.
Yeah. So let's get into your current, crowdfunding campaign. You got 47 hours left. You're at $30,214, 544 backers. If you can, let's get into some of your reward levels,
Sure.
and how you guys came up with your stretch goals.
Okay. So one of the things that I know about stretch goals, one thing that I've heard, the conventional wisdom is when you're doing a comic like I am, it's really good to have your stretch goals be things that enhance the actual book, extra content. So that was my first stretch goal. I have a cover spot varnish where the Mercy's figure will be, coated with a little varnish, so it's a little shiny, which I thought, myself, I don't know how cool a thing that would be. People said it's a really good thing. Printers can do it relatively easily, and it just gives the book a distinctive look and feel. And I did it, and I love it. I did it on the first two campaigns. I love the way it makes the book look and feel, and so we did it on this third campaign too. So those sort of stretch goals are really good. It doesn't add a lot of extra elements and other things that you need to ship and package and all that sort of stuff. It's just making the book better. And primarily, as you probably have gathered, I am about making this comic book. In fact, I try to streamline my Kickstarter as much as I can, given that my brain gets kind of busy sometimes. But I don't have a whole lot of extra tchotchkes. I don't have stickers and enamel pins and T-shirts and coffee mugs and a lot of that sort of stuff, because all that stuff will take more of my time to deal with having it produced and shipped across the country and all that sort of stuff. Time that I'd rather spend writing and drawing my comic book. So I try to have enough variety in my reward levels and in the stretch goals that there's some attractive things, but without adding so much to my workload that it defeats my primary purpose. So that's the general philosophical approach I took. And then as far as practical specifics on what those specific rewards and stretch goals are, I looked at a lot of other campaigns. That's one thing one good bit of advice I've heard. If you want to run a Kickstarter, maybe the single best thing you can do to prepare yourself is back a lot of other Kickstarters.
Yeah.
Because when you do, you get all their updates and you read through their campaign and you watch their videos, you see what they've done, and you say, that's cool. That cannot work for me. And you'll say, oh, that's cool, and I can do that really easily. And you'll say, I don't want it to be as complicated or as involved as that campaign is, but I can cherry pick a few ideas, and I think I can thread those into my process. So that's what all went on there. One thing I have in my reward levels is, having done now 2 and now my 3rd campaign, I have the ability to offer the previous books at different levels for this campaign, and that's a real nice thing because those books are already printed. I've got them, ready to go. And then a reader who, some readers maybe just wanted to get the latest book. And I should say, it's very important to me that every single Trekker book, if it's the only comic book you ever read of Trekker, it will be a satisfying read. You'll pick it up, you get introduced to the character, the world. They're all supposed to be, new reader friendly. But at the same time, as we were talking about earlier, the series is about a longer form story at the same time. So readers who want to go back and get some of the earlier books can pick them up on the campaign that way. Digital rewards are great to offer because no shipping costs involved, no storage fees for that sort of stuff. So I have a few of those. So yeah.
Ron, just out of curiosity, that now this is your 4th Kickstarter, your 3rd Kickstarter. This is your 3rd Kickstarter.
Right.
No, right? This is your right?
Yep,
so,
3rd.
Yeah, your 3rd one, right. Have you thought about, now that you have the other books under your belt, have you considered now launching, say, an Indiegogo campaign? Because you already have the books done, and what I've learned is that there are people that will only buy Indiegogo, and some people customers that will only buy a Kickstarter. Have you considered that?
Yeah, that's a great question. Somebody just last week was mentioning that, was raising that same question for me, and I'll be honest with you, Billy, I hadn't considered, I hadn't thought about it, I hadn't heard of it. I thought that, I do Kickstarters, that's what I do. So I am totally interested in exploring that and seeing how that would work. Again, my only real hesitation is The more time I spend, building other campaigns and writing other stuff, the more time I take away from the drawing board. So I'd want to look into it and see how involved it is. But if I can make it work, if it turns out to be another way that I can help to fund my ongoing process, if it's a good supplement for the Kickstarter campaigns without sucking away a lot of my time and energy, I'm all for it. And like I said, I've got a very simple agenda. The hashtag I use is more Trekker more often. So
Nice.
Anything that helps me,
Nice.
anything that helps me achieve that goal, I'm down for. Yeah.
Well, this is great. I'm learning a lot because my wife and I were having a discussion because we're starting our last book is now at the printer. Our rewards have all come in except for I think the shirts now is all we're waiting for. We did shirts, and hoodies, and I'm not crazy about that stuff myself. She loves that.
If you've got somebody that can help to that extent and everything, that's more power to you. I'm pretty much a one-man operation. So, but if somebody could really help and do it on a way where it's really sustainable, that's a great asset. I think you should go with it if you got it. Yeah. Yeah,
but I like what you're doing. I like the idea of putting all that back into the books, and I'm curious and maybe we should have a show, and if you don't mind coming on to the show in the future, is maybe about the tchotchkes. What kind of stretch goals do people want? Do they want, say, another 4 pages of story as opposed to everyone gets a magnet? You know what I mean?
Right.
Or everyone gets, everybody gets this enamel pin, but then that's more stuff to put into the book.
Yeah.
Or to package. That's more stuff to package. That's going to make it, it's going to take more time to get that stuff. You're going to have to manufacture. That's more manufacturers that something can go wrong with. You know what I mean? Like, as opposed to, you send your book to the printer, it just goes. Now, are you guys doing hardcovers as well? Or are you sticking primarily with the soft cover? What's your feelings on it?
I'm sticking with a soft cover on these. Sorry?
No, I'm listening.
Yeah, so I'm sticking with a soft cover on these because that's the format of the books that we'd had up to this point. My next Kickstarter, I can safely say, since I know this one's working, my next Kickstarter, which I'm planning to launch early next year, will be for hardcover. It's going to be a hardcover to recollect all the earlier books that are out of print now, the ones that came out through Dark Horse, and put that as a slightly oversized and this time in full color hardcover. So that'll be my first foray into hardcovers. So again, something new. I'm going to have to do some more research and learning, a little bit trepidatious, but I've got some people here that I do work with, people that have, a lot of production department experience at comic book companies. And one of them I hire, and she's my printer consultant, or whatever you want to call it. And so she has really held my hand all the way through the process of, what kind of paper and how to make, how to format the pages so that they're going to go to the printer and we're going to give back the book that we want to get back. Yeah. Because that's, again, that's another one of those worlds that I don't know that well. And the hardcover is going to have its own set of new things. But I'm looking forward to figuring that one out.
So you're thinking of actually doing like an omnibus?
Yeah, the plan is to call it Trekker, the Complete Journey Volume 1.
Oh, that's fantastic.
How many
I look
pages?
forward to that.
I know we're getting ahead of ourselves, but have you looked into the page count for that?
Well, it's going to be over 300 pages.
Whoa, that's a big, heavy book. All right.
Oh.
It's going to be a big book, but that's the natural byproduct of having done a comic book for as many years as I have. You got a lot of material there.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Now, I'm sorry. Now.
Oh, so I was just wanting to get into you're on your third crowdfunding campaign. So obviously you've learned things. Probably some good advice you could give. Some definite don'ts for those out there that are starting to do this on their own. What would be the best advice you could give, our fans out there that are watching that, come to the show to get tips and tricks on crowdfunding?
Well, probably the key ones I think I've sort of already covered. Be as realistic as you can about your capacities and how long it's going to take to get these things done. Do as much research as you can into the costs, printing costs, and especially the shipping costs. Mm-hmm. It always costs more to get these things, whether it's books or whatever else you're doing. shipped than you think it's going to, especially if you wind up having a lot of international backers. Oh my goodness, the cost to ship something internationally is just backbreaking. So you have to prepare for that and build all that stuff into the campaigns, or you're gonna just have a financial disaster on your hand.
Mm-hmm.
Do your groundwork before you launch the campaign. You've got to either, if you don't have a product that's going to just, you mention it one time on Facebook and it's going to take off like wildfire, and everybody's going to spread it for you, and you don't know whether you've got that product or not. You need to invest time to do the groundwork and get a basis of support that's going to give you a good chance of funding that, whether that's family and friends, or being on social media and getting a decent following that way, or whatever it might be. But if you launch a Kickstarter and nobody's there to see it, it's gonna go away. So those are a couple of quick practical things there. Talk to people, back other, go to Kickstarter and observe, back campaigns. Don't be a pain in the butt by asking a creator a ton of nuanced questions. But if you can ask, if you have one or two very specific questions about specific things, I see that you did a series of postcards as a reward level. Did that work for you? Whatever it might be. But just one or two specific questions of a creator. Most of us, that's one of the great things about what I call the Kickstarter creator community, is that I think we all realize we're in the same boat. We're all sort of trying to figure out how to make this thing work. And we're generally really generous with our time and experience and information to try to help other creators have success too. So you won't find people not willing to help you, but you will find people who are always hard pressed for time. So don't abuse that or try to take too much advantage of that.
Excellent. That's great advice. And Muttman has another question for you. He's asking, Ron, I'm looking outside my current comics community to grow my audience. Can you give any advice on growing your audience out of other interests / genres?
Boy, that's not my area of expertise either. But a couple of things, I missed a little bit of the question, but it sounded like growing his audience outside of his current comics.
Correct. Current interest, basically expanding to how does he spread the word, I would say, of his book? How can he reach other audiences and try to get them interested in his book?
You can go to there's a lot of interest groups and chat groups or whatever on Facebook pages that have certain interests. You can join those and participate in those discussions. You can do fan art for projects that are related to yours, have some sort of an overlap, and hashtag those things so people can find them. Oh, he did a drawing of Stranger Things, and his own comic book is sort of a suspense, retro sort of feeling thing. Maybe I'll check it out, that sort of stuff. So you find ways to have some overlap between what you're doing and these other areas. Fan art and engaging in discussion groups about that sort of stuff is a way to sort of get on that radar. It takes time. It takes time and some effort.
I think that's actually, you say that, and I'm actually thinking of when I'm at conventions and I look for certain, I'm a huge Ninja Turtles fan. It's what I grew up with, right? So I really like seeing how other artists interpret those characters. And once I see that, it then kind of invites me over. And then next thing you know, I'm buying their, creator-owned book because, just seeing some of their other art and concepts, it drew me in. So, I think that is great advice. If you can kind of do some other things that may catch their eyes, it may bring them over to you to explore what else you're capable of and what you're actually putting out there.
Yeah.
So, well, geez, I mean, man, we're hoping to have a.
The time flies, I know.
I know.
Yeah.
We told you we keep you here. We're almost coming to an hour and a half now. Ron, I'm going to put this out there. I'm going to propose to Mark Nathan for us to have at San Diego. I have a crowdfunding comics panel, and I'm hoping to do it at the Baltimore Comic-Con as well. And if we do it, would you mind being on with Nile and I on the show? Because we'd love, if you don't mind. It seems to be growing every show that I do. I mean, every convention we do, the audience keeps growing. Mm-hmm. More and more people are coming to our show and subscribing every day, it seems. And if you get 45 minutes or so and think about it, but we'd be honored to have you on, if I may speak for you, Nile, of course. But
oh yeah. Always.
No, that sounds like a great idea to me. And like I said, I'm going to be in Baltimore, so that's something we should be able to hook up with for sure.
Great. And how do we do? Are we doing all right, Nile? With how is Battlefields doing?
Battlefields, we are currently at 30,214. But let me just refresh it real quick. But I think, you're at 30,224.
All right. Okay. So not so bad.
Yeah.
And I will say that my the next stretch goal I have is at 30,500. So we're still a couple hundred and change away from that, but that's exciting. It's going to be a full size, it's like a wall size poster. It's going to look like a sort of a distressed weathered recruitment poster. Since it's called Trekker Battlefield, that seems like a fun idea. And the other thing is, it's a poster that it's going to come folded so that it can fit in a package with the books and stuff. I was thinking, again, practically, when you're looking at rewards, things that are going to be manageable to do, and a big poster that have to come separately, mailed separately or rolled up in a separate tube or something like that was just more involved and expensive than I wanted to get into. But anyway, so what, $250 more or something like that, and we'll be there. That's really exciting. I'm thrilled.
Well, you've got 47 hours left. I mean, it's definitely a doable stretch goal. So, guys, look, hey, if you can, many of you actually have backed, and thank you so much. And you've been, letting everyone know through the stream. So I know Ron and his team, and actually, I believe Ron, your wife has been on. Very supportive woman. I believe that's who's on here. Is it Lynn? I think
yes.
She said yes. So she had someone had mentioned her name in the chat. So I mean, this is great. And guys, if you can't, and this goes for any crowdfunding project. If you, sometimes, hey, we just don't have the means and we want to do it, But there's one thing you can always do, and that's share it. Share on your social media. If you really believe in something and you just don't have the means this month, and we all have bills. I know I can't support all the ones I want to. If I did, my wife would boot me out of this house. But just share it, and that's all you have to do, because you may know one person, 2 people, 10 people that may love this as much, and they can help support it. And then when the time comes, you can catch a copy of it later down the road. So as always, if you just sharing is supporting. So, let's see. Let's see if we can spread the word and get to this next stretch goal on Trekker.
Awesome. Thanks a lot, guys.
Yeah. And what's cool about this is that this really isn't, without sounding wonky, this really is a human way of publishing. I mean, because you are interacting with other people, and it's familiar, and I love it. I love it. And we're honored to have you on, sir. It's a privilege. And, just please, we hope to have you back on if you don't mind. We're going to be doing some compilation shows about topics, as we said, maybe a topical thing. And
Jimmy Palmiotti just joined in, and I've never saw Billy so quiet. He came in at the right time. Why is Billy Tucci so angry? He said. Jimmy says Ron is brilliant by his work.
There you go. So again, guys,
thank you, Jimmy.
We've done pretty good this afternoon. I mean, the numbers are great. So I'm proud to have been. If we did help it at all or something, I'm proud of that. But again, guys, as Nile said, we all can't afford to back these projects. But if you can share it, please, at least share it. Share on your social media. Share it with your friends. Share it with your family. Just get it out there. I mean, Ron is one of the greats. He really is one of the good guys, and it's a true honor to have you on, sir. It really is.
Yeah, thanks for being on the show.
Thanks so much, guys. It's been great. Really appreciate the chance to come on. It's been great visiting with you guys. It's been a lot of fun, and it's helping the campaign. So it's just a big win all the way around. I'd be happy to do it again.
Oh, fantastic. And we're happy to have you. And as many of our viewers know, at the end of the show, we like to do a crowdfunding call out. And this week, a new one came to us from Indiegogo. And this is Legends of the Lone Wolf. If you were around for 200 years, you have plenty of stories to tell. So I'm going to play the intro video for you guys for Legends of the Lone Wolf.
Legends of the Lone Wolf. 80-page full-color anthology. With your support, we will bring you a perfect-bound 80-page book of the highest quality. Everyone involved has donated their time and talent, and all the money will go to printing and shipping before any of the creators turn a profit. Unlike other anthology books, Legends of the Lone Wolf contains a 38-page feature-length supernatural story. That's nearly twice the size of a regular comic book. This campaign is the only way to get the variant aged edition of Lone Wolf's #1. This highly unique version of our first issue will be printed on a stunning aged newsprint and features a cover by the one and the only Muttman. So don't sit on your hands, Wolfomaniacs. You're going to have to get out there and grab a copy for yourself. Oh, yeah! Dig it!
So we've got a little bit of a celebrity on this one, as the video shows, and he's been in our chat. Muttman has done a cover for this one. So awesome, Muttman. You know, when we get you on, Muttman actually, Ron, Muttman and Macho Dan are going to be on our show. They're our Thursday guests this week, and you know, they do their own indie comic thing and everything. So yeah, guys, check out Legends of the Lone Wolf on Indiegogo. All right, guys, so this has been a great show.
Sounds great.
Ron, we appreciate everything that you do. Let's keep on trekking with Trekker. And, you know, if you got anything coming up, another Kickstarter in the works, email us. We'll get you on. We'll check it out. And, yeah, I hope you'll join some of the panels that Billy brought up. Should be a good time. And ScotchCon. Don't forget ScotchCon.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
The most important event.
And find out what Ron Randall really thinks about crowdfunding comics at Scott.
Let me tell you something. All right, everyone. So tomorrow, Billy, would you like to introduce tomorrow's guest?
Yes, the one, the only, Ron Randall's nemesis, Mr. Carl Kessel.
Yes, we have Carl Kessel on tomorrow night to discuss his crowdfunding project on Kickstarter. So, guys, we will see you tomorrow night at 9 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. Everyone, have a wonderful night. Ron, thank you. Billy, keep on working. Never sleep, because you can't. Get the work done. Same goes for you, Ron. Never stop.
I'll do it.
So great luck with it. Remember, everybody, please share Trekker Battlefields. And if you guys can hit the like button on our for Ron on our own page and subscribe. And just thanks a million.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Have a great night, and we'll see you tomorrow night.
Bye, sir.
Bye.
Hey guys, thanks again for tuning into Crowdfunding Comics. We look forward to hanging out with all of our crowdfunding fans every time we go live. And don't forget to click the link below and subscribe to our channel. And there's a little bell. You may want to hit that too. This way you get all the great notifications when we go live and when we upload some awesome content. You want to follow us? Sure, go right ahead at Twitter at CrowdFundComics with an X, Instagram, Crowdfunding Comics, and Facebook at Crowdfunding Comics. Till next time, crowdfunding fans, we'll see you soon.